Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to this evening's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve this evening's agenda. We have a motion by Commissioner Mua.
Second.
And a second by Commissioner Issei to approve the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 HRA meeting agenda. Moving on to approval of minutes, 3.1. The April 23rd, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the April 23rd, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Carter, second by Commissioner Mua to approve the April 23rd, 2024 HRA board meeting minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes 4-0. Before we move on to new business, I would like to make note that Commissioner Wooten is participating via phone tonight. He will not be able to participate as a quorum member, so just making note on the record that he is participating by listening in via phone this evening. Moving on to item 4.1, it is a public hearing and approval of Section 8 Agency and Administrative Plan Substantial Amendment. So, first thing we'd like to do is I'd be looking for a motion to open the public hearing for item 4.1. Okay. Oh, is that what you like to do? Okay, I apologize. We were going to change the order of that. So we will first be having the staff report on item 4.1.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Anna Salvador, I'm the Assistant Administrator for the HRA. So before you tonight are proposed amendments to the 2020 HCV 5-year agency plan and the 2024 Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. As a quick review, the administrative plan, or admin plan as we call it, details local policies and procedures for the HCV program. While many of the program guidelines are prescribed by HUD, locally the HRA does have some flexibility in determining local policies. As part of the comprehensive update that we completed in 2023 for the 2024 administrative plan, it was identified that more significant review was needed for our waiting list and selection policies before the waiting list was reopened. And changes to local preference policies are considered a significant amendment to the 5-year agency plan, which is why that plan is also in front of you this evening. So back in July of 2023, staff initiated a racial equity impact assessment, specifically reviewing waiting list policies and selection policies as part of the administrative plan. That review took a few different steps. So we completed a demographic review of the program, reviewed current processes and associated policies. There was also a comparative analysis with neighboring housing authorities, seeing how they're approaching their waiting lists, lessons learned, and things like that, especially with the incorporation of our new software program, and there's other housing authorities in the area that also use that software. We also had listening sessions with current program participants and did outreach to community partners as well. So a quick overview of the demographic review that we did. On the slide here, the first column is showing the breakdown of the applications we received back in 2018, which was the last time our waiting list was open. That is compared to current program participants, and then I also just put for reference what our Bloomington city population distribution looks like. I do just want to call attention to, I think, the two major areas we identified, which were the American Indian or Alaskan Native and Hispanic populations are currently underserved in our program as a comparison to the number of applications that we received back in 2018. We accredit this to two key things. If you look at our current program participation kind of population, the majority of the households that we're currently serving came to Bloomington through a process known as portability, which rather than being issued a voucher from our office, they actually moved from a different area with a voucher already, and then we had since absorbed them into our program. And the other reason is households that may have been issued vouchers from our office that fall under these groups have not remained in Bloomington after initial voucher issuance, which is allowed under the program. So those are the two reasons we thought that might explain where the difference is coming from with this demographic information. This is just a map of the current waiting list process. So I think at high level, specific procedural elements were put into place to make managing the list more administratively feasible, but they've also created major barriers to accessing the program. So just to quickly walk through this, the Housing Authority or the HRA would determine when it's time to open the waiting list. There's promotion, significant promotion of the fact that the waiting list would be open. Then the waiting list is open for a period of time. So the last time we opened the waiting list, it was open for a 2-week period. And then the waiting list is closed. Of those applications that were received that were meeting the criteria to be eligible for the program, a lottery is then done of those eligible households to then just be placed on the list. And then there's a waiting period, and this is really where that big time jump is. So the first 5 steps of this process all occur within a very short window of time, and then the waiting period can take a number of years before a household is selected from the waiting list to be issued a voucher. During that waiting period, another process that occurs is the update process. So periodically, it was on average once a year, the HRA would send an update application to all households that were still showing as active on the waiting list, requesting updated household information and making sure that they're still interested in receiving a voucher. So that's the current process as it stands, and that update process was all still done by physical mail and with physical paper application. So significantly administratively burdensome to have a very large list to manage all of those paper applications. So some key takeaways is really looking at all the information from this review of the program. What are the levers in the HRA's control to make the waiting list more accessible and available for as many households as possible, and the need is far greater than can ever be served with the resources available based on our funding allocation. So what we identified could be improved from this process is a focus on program access and opportunity to get on the list, because even getting on the list is a significant hurdle, especially if it's only open for 2 weeks and only open every few years. So the other thing I will flag is implementation of a new software presents opportunities to reduce some of the barriers that households encountered with our prior waiting list system. So the proposed changes are broken down into 2 categories. There's the policy changes, and then there's also more procedural changes, how we implement the program on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of policy changes, one thing staff is proposing is having the waiting list open all the time rather than for a short window of time. All primary communication for the waiting list will now be done via email versus online portal, via email and the online portal versus a physical mail. And other changes specifically with the selection process and preferences. So we are proposing to remove the lottery process completely and incorporate a selection criteria based on the date and time that their application was received and prioritizing the Bloomington preference. So 95, anytime households were to be selected from the list, 95% of those households would have a Bloomington preference, and then 5% would be all other applicants of our waiting list. The other kind of component to this is streamlining the preferences that are available on our waiting list to really make this selection criteria effective. And also we are proposing to expand the local preference to include homeless individuals with a metro area continuum of care assessment or shelter stay in the last 12 months preceding their application. In terms of procedures, a couple key changes are being proposed, which is a more regular update process, so every 6 months versus periodically. And this is possible using the Save My Spot process in our software system. Essentially, it's one mass email that gets sent by staff, and households would then have to answer approximately 3 to 5 questions in order to communicate that they're still interested in being on the list and that their information is still up to date. We see this as a great opportunity to be in more consistent and regular contact with households, and hopefully, make sure that our system remains up to date so that when it is time to pull a name from the list or a group of households from the list, we know that we're working with households that are active and ready to be issued a voucher. One other proposed procedural change is more engaged application support, at least especially during the first 2 weeks of opening the waiting list. So one thing that we are proposing is having application workshops here at City Hall where there'll be computers available and staff to assist with the application process. Also, because our waiting list would be open all the time, if a household comes into City Hall at any time once the waiting list is open, we could support or help them at the front counter because we do have computers available there as well. And then another key kind of procedural change that will be implemented alongside our new software is regular monitoring of who is applying to identify when targeted outreach is necessary to make sure that our list is reflective of the population in Bloomington and also the greater metro area. So this is essentially what we envision the new proposed waiting list process to look like. So as you can see, there's a few less steps. I will flag that these changes do not necessarily make the waiting period any shorter, especially with what we anticipate to be a much larger list. The waiting time for households will still be significantly long for vouchers. But there will be an enhanced opportunity to get on the list. So even if someone were, for whatever reason, to miss their opportunity to get issued a voucher, either they didn't respond or, primarily that they didn't respond to a request from our office, they could easily reapply and have another opportunity for a voucher. Again, like I flagged earlier, we anticipate that this will improve communication channels between the HRA and applicants and just have a much more clear process for the household on what the steps are to getting a voucher, essentially. So a notice was published and a 45-day public comment period was held for both the 5-year agency plan and the administrative plan. Noticing of the comment period was also sent to all current HCV program participants using the Resident Advisory Board or RAB process, and no comments were received at this time. Upon approval, staff is working towards a July 2024 waiting list opening for the HCV program. And with that, I will turn it over to the chair. Thank you. For public, let's do the public hearing first, yeah.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'd be looking for a motion to open the public hearing for item 4.1.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Issei and a second by Commissioner Mua to open the public hearing for item 4.1. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. I do have one question. Okay. Yep, I do see Commissioner Wooten has joined via WebEx. Welcome. So at this time, it would be a roll call vote. May we have the roll call, please?
All right. Chair Hu-Hing,
Aye.
Commissioner Issei,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
Commissioner Wooten. Try again.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Wonderful. So we are now open for the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? Is there anyone on the phone that wishes to speak on this item?
I do see a caller. Let me see. Hello, you may speak. Oh, I think that was Commissioner Wooten's only, so. So yeah, there's no one.
Okay. I'm going to do one more call. Is there anyone here in the chambers that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing no one come forward, at this time we'd be looking for a motion to close the public hearing regarding item 4.1. We have a motion by Commissioner Mua. Second by Commissioner Carter to close the public hearing on item 4.1. May we have the roll call vote?
Chair Hu-Hing,
Aye.
Commissioner Issei,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
and Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Motion passed.
All right. With the motion passing, I will now open this up for questions. Are there any questions? Commissioner Mua.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions regarding keeping the waiting list open continuously rather than opening for a specific period. Is there an additional cost or additional workload for staff having it open all year round versus a specific 2-week period?
Not with the new software system that we have, so it has the ability to support a much larger amount of data in terms of just applicants. So with the software, that component is really feasible for staff. And then in terms of staff, like maintenance of it, again, it's that Save My Spot process primarily, which would be the main kind of management of the waiting list. And with communication being primarily over email or through the online portal, it simplifies that process administratively for staff as well. So.
Okay. And then second question, as far as promotion and marketing of the year round, is there going to be additional marketing that goes on year round to ensure that people know that it's a year round process? Because that's one thing I am a little concerned about is if it is a year round process and we only market it once a year, are people missing out who need the support?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I will say we are following a similar model to Dakota County. So Dakota County currently has their waiting list open all the time. After that initial opening, essentially they rely on Housing Link. So anyone can go on Housing Link and it lists any waiting lists that are open and links them directly to the application for those waiting lists. And so we would probably follow a similar pattern where it would be published on Housing Link and on our website at any time that the application is open. And that's kind of what our approach is going to be or is planning to be so far.
Commissioner Issei.
Would this affect, because there's an influx of applications and the waiting list would get longer, would this affect how long each application is processed?
Thank you for the question. Can I ask a clarifying question? So in terms of the processing time once someone's selected or just the waiting time once they're on the waiting list?
After they're selected.
So after they're selected, the nice thing about how the application is set up is that it kind of brings all of the information they've already provided into the more extensive intake application. So they're not starting from zero. Again, that application would all be done through the online portal as well. So hopefully because they've been using the Save My Spot process and have used that portal before with the initial application, it wouldn't necessarily be a new system for them when they're doing the application. And we also have a computer available at our front counter, and we actively assist households regularly during regular business hours with applications for the program. So, yeah.
I actually have another question
Yeah.
regarding the technology piece. If we have people applying that may not have access to email personally or at home or whatever, how are there other ways we're reaching out? I just have a concern that people might miss an email if they don't have access to email. Not everybody has the technology that may be applying. So
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple ways we've kind of thought about this. So one thing is there's always the reasonable accommodation process, and with our current online portal, we have done reasonable accommodations for households that just are not comfortable using the internet for various reasons, and so that would be available to households as well if they aren't able to use the online portal. So.
are there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. So, so I think you said 2018 was the last time that the wait list was open, but I assume that we are still issuing vouchers every year. It's just the wait list is so long, right? Okay. And so then this kind of save my spot process. So if somebody is on the wait list and they're, let's say, number 50, and then in 6 months, there's the kind of renewal, and 40 people don't respond, then the person who is 50th would be bumped up to 10th.
That's correct, yeah.
And then any new ones would be subsequently. Okay. And so if you were to have a certain number of applications and a certain number of vouchers with this 95% Bloomington preference and 5% other, does that mean that kind of the proportion of applicants, like 95% of the proportion of applicants would need to be from Bloomington, and then the other 5% could be from other places? Or do we still kind of prioritize all of the Bloomington applications first? Okay.
Yeah, so essentially what it would create is two buckets within our waiting list where all of the Bloomington preference households would be in one bucket, and then all of the households without the local preference would be in another bucket. And so sorted by date and time in each bucket, essentially. So when we go to select, we'd first 95% of however many we're selecting at that time would be pulled from the first bucket, and then 5% from the other bucket.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Hearing and seeing no other questions, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the significant amendment to the 2022 HCV 5-year agency plan with certifications and amendments to the 2024 Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan for submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Wooten
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Mua. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Mua?
One piece I would love to see is just the numbers come back, right? So after we have this for a year, I'd love to see, are we reaching more people? Are the changes we're making having an impact on it? So I'd definitely love to see it report back.
Commissioner Carter?
I just wanted to thank staff for revisiting this policy and applying the racial equity assessment and bringing these recommendations forward to make our program more accessible and equitable, and also appreciate the engagement process and engaging people who are currently part of this process and in the program to help inform it. So, thank you.
I agree with that. Hearing no other discussion, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Chair Hu-Wing,
Aye.
Commissioner Issei,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
Commissioner Wooten.
Aye.
Motion pass.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4.2, which is 700 American Boulevard Purchase and Development Agreement and Affordable Housing Trust Fund Loan. May we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. I'm here today to talk about 700 American. It's the third time you've seen this in 3 months, so I'll try and go a little bit quicker through some of the items, but it should be mostly familiar. But tonight, we'll hopefully be taking action on the Purchase and Development Agreement and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan. So a lot of this is repeat, but for the sake of the meeting and some people that might be watching online, 700 American is on the north west corner here by the REI. That's a vacant parcel that the city owns on Lyndale and American Boulevard. The project that is proposed is a 128-unit senior, active senior apartment building. 8 units would be affordable at 30% area median income. This is supported through the project-based vouchers. If those vouchers leave, there's ability to renegotiate whether we'd have those 30% units, but the entire building will be averaged at 50% area median income. So having those units, you can see 104 units would be at 50% area median income, and then 16 units would be at 60% area median income. Additionally, there's a small commercial space, about 1,500 square feet. Project timeline, we had opened up for RFP back in 2022. We had selected, at council, selected Schaefer Richardson as the developer for the project. In 2023, we worked through the entitlement process, the zoning process, and in December, they went to council and received their zoning entitlements for the project. And then starting in January, they received their low-income housing tax credits. So we started the financial package. And we brought to you a term sheet in March. And then in April, we brought to City Council the tax increment financing and the land sale with a write-down, lower reduced price. And April 23rd, you remember, we passed the tax increment financing and a resolution for the Environmental Response Fund grant. So hopefully we'll hear about that in the near future. And today, like I had mentioned, we're talking about the development agreement and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan. And we hope to close real soon here in June and start construction by in July. And if all things go well, the project should be open end of 2025. So again, some of the financial tools, tax increment financing, we had gone through that approval process. Council approved the sale of the property for $1.1 million. We had put in the RFP $2 million, so this would be a reduction of $900,000. That was approved. And tonight we're talking on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan. The total project cost is about $40 million. That trust fund loan, there's still a range that we're honing in on from 2.6 to 3.46 million. That 3.46 million is the top that we have. That's the remainder of our trust fund, so we can't go above that. And I'll go into some of those details of the loan, but there's the write-down and percent of total project cost that's public to private ratio. And just a reminder, you're probably familiar with this, but what does 30%, 50, 60% translate to in kind of rents? You can see a one bedroom at 30% area median income is about $700 a month. Incomes that came out, 30% area median income for a family of 4 is about $37,000. So you can see the need for these units for residents of our community. And we have goals set by Met Council that we try to achieve on a regular by 2030. So you can see here our goal for 30% we're lacking, and this will help us get to that. But additionally, it will help us with that 50% too, where we haven't quite achieved that goal yet. So the purchase and development agreement that was in your packet, it outlines the different aspects of what the expectations of the project. So it looks at the financial tools that we're giving. It outlines the tax increment financing, the sale price. It also describes the expectations for the project, that we expect the developer to produce a building with 128 units and that it would have an average of 50% area median income. As you may recall in our previous meetings, we talked about council would like asked us to add language regarding labor practices to kind of deter wage theft. So we outline what are the expectations around that, about reporting, and what if there is an allegation, who should they be informing, and how can we get information for us to address that issue. It also outlines important things like insurance, and there's a lot of boilerplate information in there that's good to have in contracts. But it also has a form for income monitoring so that we can continue to monitor compliance in the future and make sure that they are meeting the expectations of the affordability requirements. And then with the contract, it kind of outlines remedies for noncompliance. What happens if a party is not fulfilling their part of the contract? So the Affordable Housing Trust Fund loan is proposed to be 18 years. This is to match their private mortgage lender. Again, that loan amount we've built into the contract kind of a range that they could pull from. It would have a 4.5% interest, so this is kind of how our revolving loan fund works. We took a bond out to replenish our loan fund, and then we charge interest to help kind of, that additional interest will then be what we can use for future projects. So 4.5%, is still better than what you can get in the market, but it helps us grow for future projects as well. And so we are proposing to pay that back through tax increment financing. 80% of that increment would pay back the loan, 20% would go for pooling for other projects. So again, we're finding ways to support future projects. And then that still won't cover the full payment, so 25% of annual cash flow will help pay that loan balance down. And then at the end, we're anticipating that there'll still be remainder left on the balance. So in years, we're anticipating 16 through 18, there's probably going to be a capital event, a sale or refinancing. And at that point, then the loan would be due, and they would pay the remainder of the balance due. Because we are capturing the tax increment financing for 26 years, depending on when it might be year 16, there'll be additional increment that's coming in. We'll kind of have our municipal advisor analyze what that present value would be at that time frame and reduce what that payment is, knowing that we'll have that future income stream coming in. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions. Otherwise, there are two motions, one for the purchase and development agreement and one for the trust fund loan.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Can you just see if Commissioner Wooten has any questions? I apologize.
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wooten. Hearing no questions, as stated, we do have two motions tonight. The first motion is to adopt a resolution approving a purchase and development agreement related to an affordable housing project to be located at 700 American Boulevard West in the city of Bloomington, in substantially the form in the packet.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten and a second by Commissioner Isay to adopt the resolution. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Huhing,
Aye.
Commissioner Isay,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
Commissioner Wooten.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Thank you. The second motion is to adopt a resolution approving a loan and the execution and delivery of certain documents related to an affordable housing project to be located at 700 American Boulevard West in the city of Bloomington, in substantially the form in the packet.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Wooten and a second by Commissioner Mua to adopt the resolution. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing no discussion, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Huhing,
Aye.
Commissioner Isay,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
Commissioner Wooten.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay. That closes the new business section, and we will be moving on to discussion items. Item 5.1 is prevailing wage draft ordinance discussion. May we have the staff report?
Don't get to be over here very often. All right. Erica, did you want to move up there? You just want to move up there? There was a little break. Yeah. Okay. All right, good evening. Melissa Manderscheid. I am counsel to the City Council as well as the HRA. I am here, as you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, with my colleague Amir, who's a compliance manager in the City Attorney's Office. And we are looking at prevailing wage. Back in December of 2023, the City Council raised some concerns about labor protections for a development that was under consideration. And out of that discussion grew a request for additional research and presentation to the City Council related to wage theft, prevailing wage, and some related topics. And as recent as April of this year, we were directed to prepare an ordinance on prevailing wage, which we brought forward to the City Council, as well as presentations from a variety of perspectives. There were five additional presenters that joined us during that conversation. And as a result of that conversation, they asked us to take the presentation on the road, so to speak. So we're here tonight meeting with the HRA. Do you advance the slide or do I? There we go. All right. So as I mentioned, there were 5 presenters that work in the metro area. Some of them are from Bloomington. And they were, they sort of ran the spectrum on perspectives and offered information both from their professional as well as some practical experiences. And I highlighted for your background the nature of their comments, if I could be so bold as to sort of generalize them. We also provided a link that was sent to you with a request to review the actual presentations from that City Council meeting, as well as the recording, as well as the presentation materials. So you were provided with that prior to the meeting. Essentially, the perspective that was offered by these presenters is that prevailing wage has the impact of discouraging certain types of contractors that may be using cost-cutting procedures or techniques from participating, and that has the impact of equalizing the field for those contractors and developers that want to comply with the prevailing wage requirements, as well as all of the other requirements in Minnesota law related to payroll taxes, workers' comp, insurance, and properly classifying workers. There are a wide variety of opinions about prevailing wage. The perspectives that were offered during the conversation before the council were largely positive for prevailing wage. They did offer some nuances related to the different types of projects that it can be used in. And the council desired to have additional perspectives offered, and we've been looking for them. They're a little bit more challenging to find additional perspectives, and we being Amir, spent a great deal of time looking for participants to come to the meeting. We do know that when we get to the ordinance public hearing process, that it will be an open public hearing, and everyone will be able to participate in that part of the process. And so anyone that has a perspective on prevailing wage will be have the opportunity to comment at that time. Prevailing wage is already required for many of the projects that we do at the City of Bloomington. Here is just an example of them. Oftentimes there are triggers related to dollar amount as well as to the type of project. The important takeaway that I want you to glean from the document, the slide rather here, is that it's for construction projects. It's not every project, it's construction projects. All right, so what does the city's ordinance say? We have a preamble that describes why we're doing this work, and not only the preamble, but also other parts of the ordinance were prepared after months of research and looking at other communities that have similar ordinances and perspectives from the practitioners in the field and in local government who are working within these ordinances and seeking compliance and operational practicalities of them. So we believe that we were able to select a good model to use as the approach for the Bloomington ordinance that is being discussed and considered. And it's not terribly long, but I wanted to just highlight a couple of elements of it that are particularly relevant, I think, probably for the HRA, and why we're here at all before you tonight. You see the why there, and I've talked about it already a bit, but the definition of city funds is inclusive of the types of projects that are the types of funding sources that the HRA uses, and the definition of city includes the HRA in the ordinance. So the council and others thought it was appropriate for us to come and present to you as well. The other element to make you aware of is that the ordinance says that it will be included into city procurement. And during the city council discussion, there were questions about how will this work functionally when there are commingled sources, when there are grants, where there are multiple sources of funds coming into a project. And we have been working on getting answers. We have answers to some of those questions. We're working on getting answers to all of them. And we have a dollar amount in here. So it's not a $1 of city funds. The threshold is, it's any amount of city funds, but the project has a threshold, and that is a project that exceeds $175,000. We picked that dollar amount after a lot of research and discussion internally. That's the staff recommendation out of the city attorney's office as being a dollar amount that made sense because that is a dollar amount above which the projects come to the city council for approval. Below that, they can be approved by the city manager and department heads. And so that dollar amount seemed like a practical, more easily to implement dollar amount. There is also language in the draft ordinance related to compliance and monitoring. We already are doing some compliance and monitoring through the other pass-through types of construction projects that we work on. This will be an increase. We believe that we have a capacity in the city attorney's office to do the additional compliance required, which is on-site surveying. We will need to work with staff and other departments to understand who should be on the site for the particular phase of construction that is occurring based on the interactions that that developer has had with the city. There are penalties for noncompliance, and then the other important element is bona fide apprenticeship programs create an exception to require to paying the prevailing wage rates. This acts as an incentive, but acts as a way of lowering the overall project cost, but also as a way of growing professionals in the various trades that are on site. So they are able to be trained in by experienced professionals in those trades, as well as offer a lower wage rate for the developer on the project. All right, so these are the two definitions that I wanted to make sure that you saw and how they are explained in the draft ordinance. We took the approach with regard to city funds in the draft ordinance of including everything that we could think of under the theory that the council could always remove things, but it would be easier to provide them with the main areas that of city funds that come in. At the legislature, they're also considering whether state prevailing wage requirements may be expanded. I don't know right now where that's at. The last time I looked, it was still in the legislation. So we'll provide you with an update as we get those. All right, and then prevailing wage, the thing I want you to take away from this slide is that it's a calculation. It's not a calculation done by our staff. It's a calculation done by the feds and by the state. And it's published based on the wage rates for different trades It's updated annually, and it's prepared by county. So the prevailing wage rates for an electrician in Ramsey County are not going to be the same as Pope County, potentially. So we aren't going to be doing the actual calculation of rates and determining whether the prevailing wage rate that's being paid at a certain job site in Bloomington is the correct one. We're going to go and look and see what the state requires. All right, so with regard to next steps, we're here. You're our first stop, and then we're going to be going to the Port Authority, I believe, next week, and to the Planning Commission next week as well. We will post within the next day or so on the Let's Talk Bloomington website, seeking feedback from the community on the topic, and are planning to present to the City Council in the form of a public hearing on June 17th to consider the draft ordinance. If we receive feedback over the intervening month or so on the elements, or if the legislation changes at the state capitol, we might tweak some of the elements based on feedback and additional information along the way. But we do have a draft ordinance. I believe it's in the packet, and I believe that's it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If I can't answer them, or I need a lifeline, I have a mirror here.
Thank you. Are there any questions? So I just have one, I guess, clarifying. This is already, as you stated, and I just want to reiterate that it's already at state level. It's already federal, state, and county level. So most funding, we're already kind of required to do this. Am I correct?
Chair and members, yes and no. It's based on several criteria in some cases. So, for example, highway construction projects, yes, they are using prevailing wage. They're requiring prevailing wage. On certain types of construction projects, if it has to be a construction project. And so if it doesn't rise to that level, it's not going to trigger it. Also, the way a project is put together or the funding sources of it might impact with a conclusion as to whether or not prevailing wage applies. Our plan in figuring out whether it will apply post ordinance, if the council decides to adopt it, is when we don't know, we're just going to call and ask. So if the grant funder is, for example, the Met Council, and we don't know whether a project is going to trigger prevailing wage as a pass-through, which is what it often ends up being for the city and the port and other entities, thinking specifically like livable communities grants. For those, we'll just ask them, does this apply? And same thing with county and the rest. And we'll figure that out as we go, and we'll have FAQs and be as transparent as possible. We are signaling, in as much as that's possible, that prevailing wage may be required in the Bloomington Forward projects that are not on all of them, Amir? On all of them, that it may be required in the event it does become effective before those construction projects occur. But we won't know yet. But we also recognize that there's oftentimes, especially in housing projects, many sources of funds, and so we'll need to research that in the event we have a local ordinance and figure that out. We've reached out to our counterparts in other communities to ask them how they manage that situation. The general consensus is that they ask the grantor or the funder if it's not obvious from the documents, and they sometimes have to analyze things on a case-by-case basis, depending upon whether it sort of rises to the definition of construction.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. So as Melissa said, we do have some pretty big projects in the pipeline in Bloomington that the majority will be using local funds, local public funds. And so I guess although there are a lot of construction projects that use federal and state funds and would automatically have to comply with prevailing wage, I think that there are still quite a number who, at this point, would not need to. And so I guess one thing that I would raise maybe to this board, is whether or not the HRA would want to voice a position or write a letter of support or something like that. I think that's been done in the past for different types of policies where the HRA is maybe not necessarily voting on it, but providing feedback. I'm kind of looking at you because I want to make sure I'm not out of line.
Yes, Chair and members, yes, that has happened in the past, where I'm thinking of like the Human Rights Commission and the HRA and several other commissions recommended that the City Council adopt the housing. What was the name? What did we say the name of it was? The housing, the human right, I think it was. Resolution a couple of weeks ago in April, and so there's a precedent for that. It's certainly appropriate for you all if you would like to take that position as a standalone entity, if you'd like. Similarly, if you would like to think about it and take action at a subsequent meeting, because the council is not considering it until June 17th, you certainly wouldn't have to take action tonight. If you have other questions, we'd be happy to research them and get back to you. We're easy to find, so we can be available for questions.
Thank you. I would like to suggest that if we could kind of maybe have another conversation about this. We're missing a couple commissioners that I do feel have a voice on this board as well, that I would like to get some feedback on as well. So if we could possibly bring this back before the June 17th, I'm personally comfortable putting support behind it, but I definitely want everybody to have a voice in this conversation because it's a very important one. So if that's possible, that would be my recommendation at this time.
I do know that the 28th date is pretty tricky for my life. I have a graduation to attend that I really should be at and really want to go to as well. And so if it could happen at your first meeting in June, that would be my preference. But we will respond as needed.
Okay. Wonderful. Are there any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Mua.
Just a comment. I think with the work that we're doing, it is vitally important to have all of this looked at and discussed thoroughly with the whole commission here. So I am excited to see what we chat about and what questions come out of it, because it makes a big difference. And it's going to impact, even though we're not voting on it or approving on it, it does make an impact on how we go about our work.
Correct. I agree with that. Yeah, and I think a little more time to really dig into it and evolve questions, and we can always email questions as well as we have them. So,
So, Chair and members, my request would be that those questions get sent. You can certainly send them to me, but the HRA administrator would be a good place to send those questions, and then she can aggregate them and pass them along, and we can. There might be some duplicates or similar questions, and so if we get those, perhaps if we get them maybe by the next week or two, then we can get answers back. And if there are other things, because we are sort of stopping in other places in the next week, if there are other elements that you think would be helpful for us to have addressed tonight, that would be great to know about, so that we can get the Port and the Planning Commission those types of those pieces of information next week.
Commissioner Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a clarifying question. Back to the actual topic here, and not next steps. So when I think about some of the housing projects, so not multifamily, but the individual homes, the projects that are kind of in the pipeline, obviously we've got a huge state grant for those projects. Would those be part of this? Like, is that state money, so then they would have to comply, or is it kind of more local money?
Yeah.
Thank
No.
you.
Thank you. That is a great question, Chair and Commissioner Carter. So for the Bloomington Affordable Homeownership Program, I do want to highlight that there's two different components. One, there's Bloomington Affordable Homeownership, in which we receive funding from Metropolitan Council, Livable Communities, in the amount of $300,000 to do at least 4 single-family homes for affordable homeownership with Habitat for Humanity at $75,000 of subsidy per unit. Then there is the $3,199,500 that came from Minnesota Housing for Bloomington Affordable Homeownership to do 27 new units of affordable homeownership throughout the city. And that would be at up to $118,500 of Minnesota Housing's money. HRA could potentially do money per project. However, Minnesota Housing already requires prevailing wage on that. So that amount of $118,500 actually includes a prevailing wage calculation, which is how we got to that amount per unit of potential subsidy.
Awesome, thank you.
However, with this ordinance, if passed, if there is any project that we end up putting $175,000 of HRA funds into, then yes. If it's more than $175,000 locally, if it hasn't already triggered prevailing wage from the federal or state money, then it would trigger prevailing wage.
So my sense is there probably aren't very many projects like that. No, okay, because I was gonna say, like, the example today was the 700 American, but they're getting a lot of money from the state and
Yes.
I think federal and, so
Yeah.
they already have to comply.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just as a clarifying, it's the project cost of $175,000. Right now, as the draft is prepared, it's not $175,000 or more of city funds. That could certainly be the recommendation, but at this point, it's the project, the value of the project. Which, when you build stuff today, construction projects, that's like a big shed, right? I mean, so that's a joke that sometimes jokes don't carry over in the future. I mean, you can build large things for it as well, but just to make sure that distinction is obvious to the group today. So if there is direction to change that to a different calculation, that would be something that we would need to know. In comparing how other entities have drafted, I believe it's only one city that's taken that approach of the amount of city funds. All the others take it, do their analysis based on the value of the project.
So when you say other cities, is this becoming a pretty common across the state? Is this trending? Are cities trending in this direction? I mean, I know some of the bigger cities definitely already have this, but I just kind of want to get a feel for.
Yeah. I don't know about trends per se, but there are, 7 cities? I think there's about 7 cities in the metro that have local prevailing wage. There are a lot of similarities. There are some minor differences. Ours is most similar to St. Paul's in its structure. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I guess not. Thank you. So just to summarize, we would like to follow up on this in our first June meeting. So, perfect, thank you. With that, we're on to discussion item 5.2, which is HRA board policy and issues update. Are there any updates this evening? Seeing none, we'd be looking for item 6, adjournment. We'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Issei and a second by Commissioner Mua to adjourn this evening's meeting. Seeing that Commissioner Wooten is no longer. Oh, is he? I apologize. I can't see. I would be looking for a roll call vote.
Chair Hu-Hing,
Aye.
Commissioner Issei,
Aye.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Commissioner Moore,
Aye.
Commissioner Wooten.
Aye.
Motion passed.
We are adjourned. Thank you.